it's actually a really great way to figure out what you like. You don't have to continuously buy complete guns. You can build out a lower and then just buy a bunch of different factory uppers and be like, well, I really like this one, so I'm going to actually build a lower now or buy a lower for that upper. And you're kind of being able to, quote, rent that lower around with a bunch of
that's a good way to put
uppers.
it.
All right, what is up, everybody? If you're watching on YouTube, you can see several AR-15s on the table, and the topics of today's discussion is kind of build versus buy. Now, Jim, you oftentimes talk about, AR-15s, adult Legos, they snap together. I recently, put together a couple ARs with the help of some of our great staff here at Vortex. And I'd say, to me, Jim, now, I'm not the most mechanically inclined person out there. Not the most, maybe not the least, maybe the least. We don't know that. There was a little bit more to it than I thought. It wasn't just like snap this and this, 2 pins, off you go. I mean, I think maybe it can be like that, but what I did, it was not like that. There was definitely some intricate things to it.
It depends on how from scratch you're starting. Right. You know what I mean? You can buy the thing and click it together, like 2 different things to click it together. But if you go from scratch like you did, there's some stuff to it.
There's a little bit more to it. So we've got across from us, Jim, we have Liam Ward, one of our coworkers here at Vortex, kind of definitely a strong background in the AR world. Worked previously for a premium AR manufacturer, definitely, very known in the space, very reputable in the space, making some great firearms. So, Liam, welcome.
Thank you.
First timer here.
Yeah, really excited. First time on the pod. Been listening for forever, basically, but yeah, it's fun to be on.
For sure. Very excited to have you on. Now, I should say actually 2 of these guns. Mark, because I keep forgetting you actually have ARs now. So one of them is yours.
I got 3.
One, it's really not even like an AR. It's kind of this other thing.
Kind of in-betweener.
We'll talk. But 2 of the ones on the table are Liam's. I was actually cruising through, and I'm about to do something else with this upper, so I just plopped this upper on the table. But, hey, there it is. Liam, you and ARs.
Yeah.
You have quite a relationship with this platform.
I have a pretty long history with them. Like Mark said, I worked for a long time at a really well-known high-end AR manufacturer and got to really see all of what goes into making an AR from scratch. Not, what you're talking about by building, but actually the manufacturing process and how all of that goes, and it's really cool. But yeah, I think right now we're kind of in a golden age of building versus buying, and I don't think we should even really be thinking those things being, against each other. I think there's a really cool, we're in a really cool spot right now where you can buy really high quality firearms, and you can also build really high quality firearms for about the same price. Things have changed quite a bit. You probably heard in the past, like, oh, you could build this gun for, $800 cheaper or $600 cheaper.
Yeah.
Or you could build an AR for X amount. You're paying way too much. And in some cases that's still true, but we're far and away from the era of Colt and Stag and stuff like that being your only options, which were, usually all over $1,000. You got companies now like PSA, Smith & Wesson, and Ruger selling complete guns for, really competitive prices. So that whole it's cheaper to build. In some cases it is, but in some cases it's not.
Yeah. What do you primarily do?
So let me back up. I used to buy a lot of factory guns because I think it's really important to have a factory gun. I think everyone who gets into this, AR world should at least own one complete factory gun. I mean, there's a lot of really cool things that go into it. Specifically, right off the top of my head, it's going to work. That's a big thing, right? That when you go to the store and you buy that gun off the shelf, it's been function checked. It's been ran. It's guaranteed to work. It's going to have a warranty. So there's a lot of...
It's not the first time they've it's not their first rodeo on that firearm.
Exactly.
The experiment's over. They know how to do it.
Exactly. And it kind of like the same. I would never advise like a first time AR person to build a gun. I think there's something really important about buying a factory gun. You know that it's gonna work really well. You know the fit finish is there. You know that if anything goes wrong with it, it's kind of not your fault, which is sort of, that's important.
Some comfort there.
Yeah, and you know that if at any point you want to upgrade and get something nicer, a factory complete gun is a lot easier to resell. It's a lot easier to trade in as well.
That's a good point.
So, really instead of parting out the whole gun and be like, well, this part is worth this, it's like, here's a complete X product gun,
Yeah.
And
I always do feel weird if I see stuff on the secondhand market and it's like, well, I built this myself, and you're like, well, are you any good? Or,
yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
So it's like when at a place I used to work, they used to advertise at lunch. There was like a cafe at the work, and it was Rick's hand-rolled burritos. And the thought of Rick hand-rolling my burritos was not appetizing to me.
It wasn't?
Yeah. No.
Did you know Rick?
Yeah.
Was that why? Because you knew
Did it
Rick?
make it worse that you knew Rick?
I just didn't I don't need to picture somebody's hands in my food. That's not a...
How do you think burritos are rolled?
It's fine.
On a machine?
I'd rather be...
machine-rolled burrito.
What is that? Blissfully unaware. Joe.
I guess so.
Blissfully ignorant about how your burritos are made.
How do you like your...
I'm just saying, that wasn't
never mind.
that's not what I've been... That's not the headline that I would have put to the burritos.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you always get that, Bubba's Reloads or Bubba's Builds or whatever. Are we sure?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's marketing, Jim. That's all I'm... Anyway, continue.
I think right now I like to kind of do a little bit of both. So I'll start with, I want to build, for example, this gun. I guess if you're just listening, I'm looking at a SOP mod clone that I'm building right now. This is a Block 2 clone. And I started with a DD upper because that's gets me, 60% of the way there.
Okay. DD, Daniel Defense, right?
Yeah. Obviously, if you guys don't know about cloning is where you are either an enthusiast of service rifles or you served and you want to rebuild what you served with. It's a really kind of cool, kind of niche, but becoming a lot more popular space now. I think that's primarily why building became so popular, was because they were trying to rebuild and recreate guns seen in theater. So this gun specifically would run on a Colt set or receiver. So again, this is kind of like a long-term project for me where I'm looking to get the correct Colt keyhole upper and lower set, yada, yada, yada. But for right now, I wanted it to function. I wanted it to be a complete gun. So I just went with the Daniel Defense Mark M4A1 upper with the SOCOM cut barrel. So I get pretty close to where, I get good components. But yeah, and then I'll start to build out exactly what I want from there. So I think there's a really good blend of both things that I like to do now.
Yeah. So I think we have this answer to nearly every question. But I think what you're getting at a little bit is it depends on, if you're asking yourself, do I build or buy? It depends on what do you want to do with it? What stage in your career, if we'll call it that, are you in? Because there's absolutely, I would never say you should never build a rifle, because there's plenty of instances where building a rifle would either be rewarding to do so, it might be advantageous to do so, it might be cost savingsly to do so. What's the whatever?
Costly.
Economical.
Economical, thank you.
Or cost savingsly.
Cost savings. I think cost savingsly is better.
I think that's in the new modern dictionary.
Right. It might be.
It's in mine now. I'm going to keep using that.
Yeah. It might be any one of those things. Or, heck, if you're just some absolute baller, home gunsmith and you've done it 10,000 times, maybe you feel you can eke out something better than is what's mass-produced. But, yeah, it really depends.
Well, and getting back to what both you guys have said, I amassed this, basket of parts, right? But I need, I have access to people that have done this a million times here at Vortex, right? So it's like, hey, here, help me out with this. You got an hour, let's put this together, right? Had I been, doing that myself, dude, I'd still be putting it together.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think, Liam, is, in your experience from everything that you've seen over your career and having built some yourself, what do you think is the thing that hangs most people up when it comes to building their own rifle? Like, where do you think they fall short if they're not super experienced of what a experienced, well-established AR manufacturer can produce?
I think it's really just fit and finish, right? You're trying to take a bunch of components that aren't made together and put them together.
Right. And this brand's trigger and this brand's grip and that brand's upper and that
not
brand's
even
lower.
that, but just like I said, like the receiver sets, like a lot of high-end manufacturers, they machine their receiver sets as pairs. So you're getting the tightest tolerances that you can get, and you're not going to have any wobble. You're getting a finish that is just a lot more complete. And you're also kind of like what we touched on earlier, you're getting a lot more reliability and guaranteed function out of that firearm, which is huge.
I always felt like a big one that was a little bit, I don't know. It's simple in concept, and when I've done it in the past, I've kind of been like, I haven't really put a whole lot of thought towards it. But I also hear some people describing how much better you can make the rifle if you do it a certain way, is mating the barrel to the upper receiver. Like, I don't know about your experience of what you know about it, but if you just look at a general how-to, it's kind of like stick barrel in upper, barrel extension, put barrel nut on, and torque to, and the range for the torque spec on it is it's massive.
It's like 40 to 80.
I mean, literally, you can't mess it up hardly.
Yeah. You can, but...
Well, I guess you can, yeah. But, I mean, it'd be hard to. It's not some super precise thing that they lay out for you. And so I'm always kind of like, well, I mean, is it really that easy? But then there's other people who are like, well, you got to shim it right and coat the barrel and put this surface thing or whatever.
Yeah, I think it comes with just a lot of reps with a rifle, period. I mean, if you have a lot of reps behind one of these, you start to feel and understand the differences and the nuances of, did I do this right? Is this component tolerance is correct? And in the case of barrels, if you torque it wrong, your accuracy is going to dip, your reliability could dip, your parts wear could increase. But the biggest thing you're going to see out of that is definitely some accuracy depletion. But, if you're a guy who shoots your AR 4 to 6 times a year, just dumps mags into garbage, then you're not going to notice that, right? But if you're really spending a lot of time behind it and you're trying to stretch out its capabilities, you'll definitely see the differences in accuracy and repeatability and accuracy, for sure.
I'd imagine also like what you're talking about with like, hey, for your first one, maybe get a factory gun, right? Because then you do have that baseline of a firearm that functions properly. So you're going to get a feel for that feel, and then be able to translate that over when you do eventually build one. You're like, okay, yeah, it should be like this, or at least thereabouts.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing is, if you can talk to a bunch of people, you can read all sorts of forums and stuff, but if you've never spent time behind one, you're not going to have any reference to anything that they're talking about, right? So you could have that whole a shorter barrel is better for X, Y, and Z, but if you don't know what a longer barrel feels like, how are you going to know if that's better for you or not? And that's really important.
I don't get it. Are you implying that I actually need to do something in order to have a strong opinion about it?
Well,
Have you been on the internet?
Yeah. Do you realize what year it is?
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of a lot of opinions out there.
Sorry, everybody. We thought Liam was a viable, credible guest, and it's very clear now that he is not.
Definitely not.
He's mistaken.
Experience actually means nothing.
Absolutely.
Ever.
Absolutely. You are correct.
Experience and knowledge mean nothing pertaining to any kind of topic at all.
One thing about the whole buy versus build thing, and it's interesting because earlier on we brought up the fact that, it used to be really heavily said, and in some cases still is true, and people still do say this, is that you can often build a gun to a certain level of quality cheaper than you would be able to buy it already built to that maybe same level or same level of quality of components and things like that. Now, one of the things that I think people fail to realize is that a lot of people who say that, they have an established home armory, if you will, and home sort of gunsmithing suite. The tools to build your own rifle, they're not, I wouldn't say you're going to the levels of like a, ASC certified mechanic, but you could if you wanted to get real nuts with it and buy a lathe and all that stuff. But I mean, there's a lot of tools you have to get as well to do it right.
I would say the baseline that you would need to, and this is going to be different for most people. You're going to have some people who say, well, I can do it on my kitchen table, right? Which you probably can. But if you want to do it
with my father-in-law once.
How American.
It was very American. We did put a tiny chip in his granite counter.
Ooh.
Yeah. He was so excited, though, he forgot about it.
It'll buff out.
That's the cost of doing
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
If you want to do it right and you want to do it to a quality level of a factory gun, and you own nothing, you're probably looking at about $1,000 in tools, in a workbench, in a vise, things like that. I mean, those are going to be your heavy hitters. But if you really want to do it right, you're probably looking at about $1,000 in just tools to get this thing going. And like I said, a lot of people will probably push back on that and say, well, I do it on my computer desk, whatever. But how many times have you lost something? How many times have you put dents in granite countertops because you're not doing it the right way?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, heck, I was putting that Spark Solar on yesterday, actually, on a workbench with a vise. We had the tools, still dropped a screw.
Yeah.
Well, that also, I mean, depends on the person, too.
Well, I would say if you're going to definitely get into building, I would 100% recommend buying, I forgot what company makes it, but basically it's a fishing tackle box full of spare small parts.
Oh,
and that is a really handy thing to have because a lot of this stuff is under spring tension. Detents can go flying, and you'll never see them again.
Yeah.
Until you suck them up in a vacuum.
If Scott Parks grabs your gun and decides to tear it apart, things were going to fly over the room.
It's true. It's a very Scott thing to do.
You're going to need those parts that Liam is talking about. You talked about like a workbench, a vise. What are the other types of tools that a person would need to have?
Yeah, you're definitely going to need a vise block to set this into the vise. You're going to need an armorer's wrench and hopefully a really good quality one because crappy armorer's wrenches put a lot of marring on stuff. They can not be quite exact in their measurements as well. You're going to need a really good torque wrench, and you're definitely going to need a good set of steel punches, brass and rubber mallet, roll pin starter punch, receiver bench blocks so you don't put dings in countertops. And then, like I said before, spare parts. Some things that are nice to have, magnetic bowls for all your small parts, so you can put them in there. Things aren't going to fly around. A reaction rod to hold the barrel in place, so as you're torquing down on something, you're not putting a ton of pressure on where the barrel meets up with the receiver. That's actually a really nice tool to have. Kind of expensive, but definitely good to have. Pin punches, you name it. So the list is long. Plus, if you don't have a workbench and a vise, that's a monster. That's a pretty good investment.
Mm-hmm. It is for sure. Well, I mean, if you're the kind of person who you feel, I mean, that's where it comes in, where if you bought a factory gun already and you know that this is your thing, you're like, I'm going to shoot a lot. I like ARs. I'm going to build more. Then, that starts to become more of a thing. You're like, well, it makes sense to make that investment. But it's tough to do so when you haven't even really considered what you're going to do or like how much into this you actually are.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I'm a big proponent of, for your first one, just get a factory gun. Figure out what you like. Figure out the barrel length you like. Figure out if that gun you bought doesn't fit your needs. And the only way you're going to do that is to shoot it a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Figure out what triggers you like and why you don't like those triggers. Just some components you can pretty easily upgrade. And that's the other thing. Once you start out with that nice complete gun, you're starting with a pretty good baseline. So your investment into upgraded parts shouldn't be insane. It should be just small parts, really.
Yeah. When you buy a factory gun, and you could call it an advantage or a disadvantage depending on who you are, but one of the things about it is that company has essentially already gone through the job of deciding what components are going to be on it. If you go the custom route, you have to think of everything. Or I'm sorry, then when I say the custom, I mean the home build route. You have to think of everything. And that's actually, funny enough, oftentimes where the whole like cost savings can go out the window, because you're like, wow, there's super custom special trigger pins.
Yeah.
Oh, I want those. I don't want the standard ones. Or like, oh, I can get a super custom special safety selector thing. I want that. And then that can add up the cost quite a bit. But they've done the work for you there. You don't have to think about all that. When you have to think about it, it can start to become either you get mission creep or you're spending more and more and more and more getting Gucci little tiny parts.
Jim, I'm going to shameless plug here. We did a podcast a while back called AR's Where to Spend, Where to Save.
That's right. We did. Yeah, you can always listen to that one.
So that's a good one.
Or then, you just you have catalogs of stuff to just flip through and decide what you want. I know you just mentioned, obviously, we've talked about this factory route. You figure out what you like. You figure out what you want to tweak and all that stuff. How's that look for you now when you build one? Like, what kind of stuff are you going through? You're like, okay, I'm going to focus on, going through exhausting every option and avenue that I can for this part, and for that part, just give it the standard.
Well, I think kind of what you're going off, it's not only a cost thing, but it's a time thing too, right? Like your time to find these parts, especially now, like,
you finally found it and it's not in stock.
It's not in stock, right? So it takes a long time to find those parts too, but there's also something fun in that, in my opinion. It's a project, you do your cars and stuff. It's a project. You're working on it all the time. Me, I like to usually start with barrel length. That's where that's kind of the heart of the rifle, is the barrel. So I'm always going to start with, well, what am I going to use this for? And what do I think I'm going to use this for? And then I kind of go from there. Recently, that's changed a little bit to what gun am I going to clone? I know there's I'm slowly becoming more of a clone guy, where I'm really appreciative of some of the cool service rifles out there. And so that kind of more dictates what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, before it was like, all right, well, I've shot so many different kinds of guns, shot so many different kinds of ARs. I really like, a shorter barrel. So I'm going to buy this barrel. And that's where I start usually.
Mm. That seems pretty logical. Like that barrel length is going to kind of dictate what the gun will ultimately be in a lot of ways, or what it's for,
pretty much
how you want to use it.
That and caliber are pretty much the things that dictate most. Receiver sets are cool and they're really important, obviously, but the barrel length really sets up the gun for what it's going to be. Whether that's going to be a pistol or an NFA item or not, that kind of dictates some of the other stuff that you're going to put it on it. But yeah, so it's barrels are really important. I would say if you're building a gun, do not skimp on a barrel.
Yeah,
barrels make all the difference.
What, even within that, let's say you've chosen a length, there's still umpteen gazillion choices you can choose within that length, or at least that, like, very close within a half inch or maybe an inch or so. You've got, phosphate, chrome line, nitride, stainless, carbon, big, thick, heavy barrels. Yep. You've got lightweight, skinny barrels, regular, medium ones with pinned gas blocks, ones with, the list goes on.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it kind of goes back to right now for me specifically, that a lot of that's dictated by the cloning process.
Right.
But in the past, I never really dove into those super heavy. It was always like, well, I know this brand makes an excellent barrel. I know this brand makes an excellent long life, very accurate barrel. So I'm going to start there.
Mm-hmm. Whatever they offer in the length I'm looking for.
And then whatever length,
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think about, like, these different contours and stuff of barrels. Like I remember there was a period of time where I was like, oh, it's so sick that there's like lightweight barrels. They're super skinny. But then some people were like, well, you can't be as accurate with a lightweight barrel. And so then I was like, wow, now I get maybe like slightly chunkier barrels. But then
I don't think it really matters to the majority of people who are going to build a gun. I don't think you're going to see that much of a difference in accuracy. I don't think you're going to see that much weight savings either. I think that's, sort of myth. By the time you put optics, lights, et cetera, those couple ounces you saved on that barrel, you're making that up somewhere else, really. And, as far as contours go, unless you're doing something with a very specific handguard, I don't think it's that important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say if anybody, some people are like, oh, this gun's heavy or whatever. And I get trying to ounces add up to pounds, all that. But, feel like most other fighting carbines out there, there's a lot of guns that are way heavier than an AR-15.
Yeah.
The whole thing, almost the whole thing is aluminum.
Yeah.
Aside from the barrel and the bolt and all that, but a lot of other guns are all this stamped steel and wood and all that stuff.
Like your AKs or your stuff, even like a Tavor and stuff like that.
Well, even like Liam commented earlier, this SOTMOD clone that he has here, he's like, it's a little bit heavy, but it's cool. And I picked it up and I was like, it wasn't overly heavy actually, and it's kitted out. It's got LPVO on top. It's got
laser beams.
It's got some laser beams on it. It's ready to rock, and it wasn't. And me, Jim. I fancy a lightweight gun, but I didn't find it was like, I'd never carry this thing around.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things. So while we're on the barrels topic, and part of the reason I had my upper up here is because I brought it up to old Larry, who's going to help me put a different muzzle device on it. But figuring out the muzzle device, well, there's certain things just overall when you build, or even when you buy a factory gun that you have to think of for the future. And so, Liam, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. I know with myself, there's like a fine balance between, there's like some new part or component to a firearm, and it's kind of a bit, we'll say, trendy for lack of a better term.
Sure.
And I'm kind of like, I want it, but I'm also nervous that trend's going to die off, and then I'll be stuck with something that has no more support. And then there's the old tried and true mil-spec whatever that you're like, well, it's not as cool, but at least it's going to be around for the next 100 million years.
Sure.
So I'm thinking about that too with like muzzle devices. Which muzzle device you put on it, you're like, well, I'm putting that on because I want to put a suppressor on it. This is going to be a host for a suppressor. But then it's like, okay, now I got to actually think about. I've been having to literally create. I never create spreadsheets. I hate them, Mark. But I'm creating a spreadsheet. It's on I'm using Microsoft Word because I don't get Excel.
Whoa.
But, because I'm like, okay, I have these suppressors, these rifles. Those suppressors can go on these guns, but they can't go on those ones because I don't have that muzzle. But these, and there's all of a sudden all this, once you start getting more than one gun or you want to start having things swap around, you have to think ahead.
Yeah, so...
You're growing up, Jim. You're thinking about the future.
Yeah.
New Jim.
What can I say? I actually ate breakfast this morning, too.
It must have been the near-death experience, right?
Must have been that. Must have been.
I think that there's so many options out there, specifically for muzzle devices, but one of the things that I think as a whole the firearms manufacturing space could get better at is a little bit more standardization.
Yeah.
Standardization, in my opinion, is innovation, especially now. We've gone so far into proprietary parts for everything.
Yeah.
It is kind of a hassle to try and think ahead and make things work across guns and cross platforms. If you could have a muzzle device that was good for numerous different companies' suppressors, that would be awesome.
Yeah, none of us have the same muzzle device on any of these uppers.
Nope.
The other thing I noticed is I've got key mod, you've got pick rail, and over there
And
you've got
M-lock.
M-lock.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I'm fighting now is that I like key mod, but the rest of the world doesn't. They like M-lock, and so therefore I'm trying to find little adapters and things to put flashlights. You get a flashlight on yours, and you go and you get one, and you're like, crap, it's key mod because I didn't read enough before, or like ever. And so I got a key mod thing, or I'm sorry, an M-lock, or what. Now I'm all messed up. Even this is what happens,
right?
But then it's like, or you get the wrong thing, and you got to get. Then the light doesn't work with the laser, and there's all this when you start outfitting them. There's all this thinking of.
Yeah, and crap. I think recently, well, not even recently. Once the big army kind of decided M-lock was the way, everything shifted over to M-lock. Right?
Yeah,
it's more of a standardization, and. In my opinion, M-lock's a little bit more secure than key mod is. The key mod stuff can walk out a little bit easier. But either or, it really, for most people, they're never going to see a difference.
Right.
But that being said, like probably right now, you could probably find a bunch of key mod stuff on sale. So if you're trying to cost save, then it's sort of like, oh, well, I could build a key mod for a gun, save some money on some parts here and there. And, whatever. And if people call you nerd, then they call you nerd. But, you save some money. But that being said,
key mod will get you killed in the streets.
Picatinny is really coming back to me.
Picatinny, it ain't going anywhere.
No. And it's, for a long time, it's like, oh, it's so chunky, it's so heavy. But, man, there's something cool about it still. And, especially when you get into the cloning world of looking at, service rifles and stuff like that, it's really cool to see the way that they outfitted their Picatinny guns. So.
Yeah, everybody gets key mod and M-lock stuff, and then they start putting stuff on it. And a lot of times they wind up like putting a little pick rail section or whatever, and then all of a sudden they got all this crap all over there. Yeah. But there is a lot of thinking ahead, and then way back to the beginning of what we were discussing is, factory gun usually has all that figured out. And,
exactly.
And, you may have to try and then, if you're getting accessories, buy it to work within their ecosystem that they've set up with that gun. But at least you are only thinking then about things you haven't bought yet to work with the gun. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because a lot of times when this is something that will happen, if you haven't built a rifle yet, it will happen. You're going to be like, oh, I'm going to be so organized and detailed and whatever, and I'm going to get only the right parts and have nothing left over.
Not true.
Not true. You're going to have all kinds of spare parts and crap, and they'll grow into other rifles. And
yep. Literally happened to me 2 weeks ago when I was putting this one together. This lower receiver used to have a law folder on it, and I took that off because that wasn't right, and realized that I had completely misplaced the buffer detent spring. I was like, I have no idea where this went, and I didn't have any spares, so I had to drive up. I had to call a bunch of shops that were local. Luckily, one of them had a couple, so I was able to go and buy it that day. But if they didn't have it, then I'm sitting there on Brownells and ordering it, and I got to wait a couple days or whatever. So, it's always, even when you've built a number of them, there's always something that you're missing or something goes missing. Yeah. That's usually the case.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Or then you end up with spare parts because now you have a law folder.
Yeah.
What's that going to grow into?
Yeah, well, that's the problem with this addiction, right? Because you see one even spring and you're like, well, that could be a gun.
That could be a gun.
That could be a whole gun.
Nobody ever takes up, well, I shouldn't say nobody. I'm sure somebody out there does, somebody very responsible. But I've never been, like, something like a law folder, for example, that you had on this receiver. If I took that off and then I, replace it with just a regular standard setup, I'm not going to be like, well, this law folder means nothing to me. I'll just sell it for, whatever.
Yeah.
And now it's gone. I'm going to be like, I'm going to keep this because someday I may need it.
Someday.
And then it's going to sit there long enough, and I'm going to see it enough times that I'm going to be like, why don't I just get it's so annoying, it's so little, I don't want to lose it. Why don't I just get a lower, just stick it on? And it doesn't have to turn into a gun, but I'll just have a lower to just put it on.
Yeah.
And then
you don't want any of the small screws to go missing, so you're like, well, I have to assemble it and put it back on something.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you get the lower and you're like, well, I have a leftover pistol grip, I'll put that on. You're like, well, I'm so close to a complete lower. And then you're like, I should click an upper on this thing, and then next thing you know, it's like laser beams, it's optics, foregrips.
Another complete gun.
Another gun.
It's like AR seeds. It's just like this spring, and then
this could be whatever it wanted to be.
Exactly. That's right.
It's pretty amazing. But I think another cool thing about building a gun is that you kind of get a better appreciation and a higher understanding of the functionality of the gun. Like once you've built one up from parts, you kind of can understand, all right, well, if this happens, it's because of this. Or if this malfunction happens, it's because of this. And I think that's a great exercise once you've spent some time behind ARs and you're pretty familiar with them, to be able to then deep dive even further to understanding how they work. And that's a great way to understand how they work, is just by assembling one.
For sure.
Liam, have you ever like been able to spot or almost like pre-spot a malfunction because of that knowledge? Then you're like, oh, something's going on here that's different.
Yeah, or not even just like a malfunction, but you can see when stuff's going on. Like if you shoot someone's gun, it has some bolt bounce. You're like, oh, it's the wrong buffer. Or,
okay,
it's the wrong buffer weight. There's a lot of things, or it could be overgassed. There's a lot of things that go into that, but it's just kind of unpleasant for the person shooting it, especially for the first time. I remember I was shooting with a bunch of guys, and they'd just finished building a gun, and every time they shot, the whole gun would just rattle, and you could hear it just rattling. It's like, well, what buffer weight do you have in there? And it was like a massively heavy buffer weight. And they're like, well, it's just, I don't know. I was just reading. I read that this is better for this kind of gun. And I'm like, yeah, it's better for this kind of gun if it's suppressed. Like, there's a difference here. And so, yeah, just having that little bit of knowledge is good, especially when you're just seeing how things work inside.
Yeah. You bring up the like little fine tuning some of those details too. That's one thing that like that's some next level stuff. I feel like when you get into building a gun, a lot of people like to throw adjustable this and adjustable that like in a gun that they're building, and then they usually throw all the adjustable things in and then tune them all to just standard.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's like I have all this adjustable stuff and I'm not using it at all.
Exactly.
Because it's kind of confusing to use it, and it takes a lot of trial and error and testing the like scientific method, if you will. I actually at very first I was like, well, the adjustable stuff is more expensive, so therefore more better. So I'm going to buy all the adjustable stuff, and then I did it. Admittedly, set it all to just like standard setup, and didn't touch it since. Because I was like, I don't want to mess it. It works.
It works.
So now I just get all. I don't have anything adjustable in any of my guns anymore.
That's another perk of the factory gun, right? Like they've tuned it. They've been building these for so long and assembling them. They know it works. So you're going to get a gun that's really reliable, and you're going to get a gun that's really finely tuned already most of the time.
Yeah.
Are they coming with adjustable features, or it's just like, no, it doesn't have to be because this is how it's supposed to run?
Some are, but the majority I would say are just like, hey, we've tuned this gun the way it's supposed to run, and it runs.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Liam. On strategy of building and buying, and the hybridized approach,
sure,
if you will. What I have started to do more so of is I will build on my own a lower, which I usually can do slightly cheaper than a purchase lower, usually. Sometimes not, and then I just say screw it, whatever. And then I'll just buy a complete upper. Because I feel like lowers are easier for your regular dude to just kind of like put together at a kitchen counter or whatever. Yeah. Until it gets to like tightening down the castle nut. In that case, it is nice to have a vise or something. But
definitely, and a good torque wrench.
Yeah. So. But it's usually more easy. And then the upper, which I kind of like to leave to the pros because it has that heart of the gun, the barrel in it. Then I'll just buy, like this is a factory complete upper, and then I can just have a lower that I've built and just stick different uppers on it.
Yep. That's a really great way to do it. And it's actually a really great way to figure out what you like. You don't have to continuously buy complete guns. You can build out a lower and then just buy a bunch of different factory uppers and be like, well, I really like this one, so I'm going to actually build a lower now or buy a lower for that upper. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of being able to, quote, rent that lower around with a bunch of different
that's a good way to
uppers.
Put it. That is actually a really good way to put it.
But yeah, I love, that's kind of the same thing I do now is I buy complete uppers because they're tuned, they're gassed, and I hate doing gas blocks, so that's another thing. I just let someone else do that.
It does, when you get an upper, it feels like you got a new gun. Because that's kind of all, like, like you said, you can just click it onto a lower and go. And then the one nice thing is, too, is that, okay, I've gone through the paperwork or whatever of getting one lower.
Yeah.
Just having to go to the gun store and all that stuff. And now I get a bunch of uppers sent to my house.
Exactly.
And click, 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 change that around.
Try
and
it out.
Yeah, you just, it's a little bit easier process.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're kind of making sure you're not breaking any NFA rules with that.
Clicking
yeah,
around.
Yeah. Let's in a non-lawyer fashion, don't take any of our words as perfect legalese, but just do briefly explain that for anybody who's listening.
So, the law is anything shorter than 16 inches in barrel length is considered an SBR if you are putting it on a rifle lower. Most of the time when you buy a gun, and some manufacturers, when they create and register those serial numbers with the ATF, it is either a pistol or a rifle lower. And so, just make sure that you know the rules, you know the laws, and you're kind of, you're not putting on a short-barreled upper on a rifle lower, because that could be a bad time for you. So,
Yes, so this is not a discussion on the unconstitutionality of anything in that realm, but we're just saying that it just kind of like is what it is.
It's just, it's
the rules do not represent the
thoughts of people in this podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of thoughts, I need to try having a complete one.
But yeah, like you said, so for example, this gun over here, what is this, a full-on 16-inch barrels or 14.5?
So it's 14.5 with a pin and weld.
So pin and weld. So what he's saying there is, and again, we're kind of communicating to somebody who is maybe your more newer AR buyer or builder. The barrel length on that one is 14.5 inches, but the muzzle device is actually pinned and welded, which you can kind of look up what that process is. But it's pinned and welded on, so therefore it's considered a permanent part of the barrel, and it brings into that 16-inch realm.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But you have it on a lower with a stock that is designed to be shot from the shoulder or whatever. Yes. So therefore it is a rifle lower. But then you have actually over there a pistol.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me, an AR with a pistol brace.
Correct.
And provided we don't have any more overreach, then that is what it is. It's considered a pistol, and you can then have a shorter barrel on it, and you don't have to go through the NFA process. Okay.
Correct. Cool. Yep. So that's just something to be aware of for sure. It's easy to click the two together, but just make sure you're not putting something that's not supposed to go on something. Yeah.
I'm a felon. Click. Or I'm not a felon. Click. Now I am a felon.
Exactly.
It can be as simple as that, folks.
Yep.
Phooey.
It is interesting, and this is getting more. I'm totally sidetracking here, but you're talking about like, the barrel length dictates, what the purpose of the rifle and this, that, the other, and I mean, some of these shorter ARs, they're just shorter because they're purpose built for a specific application to do that job better, and it just would work better if it was easier, Jim.
It would work better if it was easier.
I just wanted to take that time to complain a little bit.
And the shorter guns are a little easier to shoot. I mean, that's just what it is.
Like those 22s that I was telling you about, Marco.
I know.
I love those 22s. They're what are they? 8-inch barrels, 9-inch barrels, or something like that. Perfect gun to like. I got a suppressor on it. You give that to like a youngster. They're not going to be all freaked out by the giant bazooka boom, and all that, and it's lighter weight. Oh, it'd be wonderful. But, heaven forbid. Anyway, we can go on about this for hours.
We can go on it forever,
yes.
And how ridiculous it is.
But yeah.
Well, I was going to ask a little bit, Liam. So we got, barely into your background, but I guess what was your gun background before working for that AR manufacturer, and then kind of like where did your interest in all this come from?
I think it really, so before I grew up like most everyone who works in this space, grew up hunting and fishing and all that stuff and around guns. But I really took interest in this space, the AR space, probably when I was around, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14. Yeah. Kind of really through like video games and movies is super influential. I grew up hunting with traditional hunting rifles, but seeing all of these cool things in video games and movies, it was really like, oh, that's a really fun, cool gun. And I grew up in a state actually that is really difficult to own stuff like this. So once I had moved out of that state and built my first AR, I actually kind of did the hybrid method first. I bought a lower and I bought a complete upper, snapped them together, boom. It's like, wow, that was easy. I have a gun. Cool. And from there, it was just, as most people can attest to this, you just start falling down the rabbit hole. I want to build this gun. I want to build that gun. I want to, kind of do this. But since then, I think it's the most versatile platform there is. I think it's the most, this really is America's rifle for what it is.
It really is.
And it's, you can do anything and everything with it. It is the most versatile platform out there, for sure. I mean, you could take this build, which looks completely military. You could go kill deer with it.
No heck yeah.
No problem. So, and you could even do it with this guy. No problem.
Why not?
It's like the practicality is just
absolutely
huge.
Yeah.
And you brought up earlier, the accessibility of them now is so great, because a lot of times you see things, you can see things go one of two different ways. Sometimes things get more expensive over time, and sometimes they get less expensive over time. In the case of ARs, I would say that you are seeing a little bit of they were expensive to start out, or at least they just seem way more unattainable. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just me, but it felt that way for, you look at them and you'd be like, wow, that's cool, but it was really expensive, or it wasn't that compatible with a lot of other stuff,
Yeah, for sure.
They were a little bit more of this mystery box, and nowadays, You brought up the one that I know I shop at all the time, and I'm going to call it out. I'm sure somebody's going to yell at me because there's lots of other ones, but like Palmetto State Armory, a couple of other ones, Smith & Wesson and Ruger, stuff like that, who are making parts or complete guns that are, relatively speaking, very affordable and good.
Yeah.
They're not all proprietary and weird. They only work with their mags or their whatever. They're like it's a full-on AR. And they're good.
They're pretty good. Yeah. I mean, for most people, they're perfectly adequate.
Yeah.
And that's probably not, bougie ARs are bougie ARs. It's sort of like cars, a normal car is probably good enough for most people.
Right. I don't know. There's something about ARs, with what you said, where when somebody hears it's perfectly adequate, they're like, I can't, something's wrong with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about ARs, and when people say that stuff, they're like, oh, I just can't get something that's only adequate.
Yeah. Well,
weirdly, what if I have to take on North Korea with it?
Weirdly, I think a lot of that comes from people justifying not spending the money. There is you're poor if you run this, whatever. But I think I see a lot more of it now is mine is just as good, so I'm justifying not spending money. So instead of but it doesn't really matter really. If once you start, you're gonna start, and you're gonna start to see where some of those inadequacies are in your cheaper builds or cheaper guns. Period.
For sure. Yeah. I am I'm full on guilty of most of my ARs. I sit here with actually a not cheap upper right next to me. But a lot of the stuff
pretty nice, Jim.
A lot of the stuff I'm getting now though, I feel like I've established I have 2 really nice factory guns. One's just a factory lower and a factory upper clicked together, and one is a full on factory gun. I've got those, and then all the rest of my guns where it's this would be good for this little niche purpose, or this one's going to be my whatever, then that, I'm like, I just get the cheap one. I just get a cheap upper, cheap lower. I'll get, that you go on that website and they got some crazy deal going where you get whatever their handguard is and all this, that, and the other thing, and it works, okay, cool. I'll take it. It'll work.
I mean, most of the time it's going to be perfectly adequate for whatever you need it to do.
Yeah.
The only time you're really going to see anything, I think, in a higher quality component is you're stretching out to range. That's when you'll start.
Is that where you really feel is that where you feel you notice the biggest difference?
For me, for sure. Yeah. Once you're starting to see barrels heat up super fast because they're not high quality barrels, then you're starting to see a lot of accuracy differences. Triggers, especially, a mil-spec trigger is probably about 6 or 7 pounds, give or take. You get a nice, aftermarket trigger in there, and you're right around 2 to 3 pounds. It's kind of, again, sort of very similar to a traditional gun. You upgrade these parts, and you're going to squeeze more accuracy, and you're going to squeeze better performance out of them. So.
Well, speaking of some of those parts, Jim, you were talking about like, I'll buy a lower parts kit. So like what, and then you're buying the complete upper. So for maybe a person that wants to go that route, what's everything that's going into that lower?
Well, you are going to start with the lower receiver itself. Then you're going to probably go to a trigger or a fire control unit. From there, grip, and then the small parts are, you could get really nitpicky with anti-walk pins or something like that, but most pins, just normal pins work fine.
If you get most of the lower parts kits, if you get that, a grip, and then, like a stock kit of some sort and a trigger, you're pretty much
there. Yeah. And the biggest thing to upgrade into lower is the trigger or the fire control group. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever need to be careful of like some of those things not fitting? Like will some triggers not fit in some lowers? Or
I think that really only comes after the fact. Like there are some triggers that are cassette triggers, so they're not 2 pieces. It's one giant piece, and then you'd have to take out something to fit it in there. So that is one of the places. Maybe it's a good place to start with that. If you know what trigger you like, then you kind of build it in first. But for me, I have a very specific trigger I really like, and it's pretty much in most of my guns, and I don't need to do that. It's still a 2-piece trigger easily.
What trigger is it?
Geisley SSAE. It's a really nice 2-stage trigger.
It's a pretty common one here.
Yep.
Tossed around a lot. Something else we were talking about with lowers. Oh, well, we were talking about all these parts and things like that, Mark, and, it wouldn't make sense to do in a podcast just list out all the parts because somebody listening to this is, well, great. I just wasted my time. Yeah. But one of the things that I think is really nice now is you're getting companies that are actually encouraging the builders. You know what I mean? So, like, it's not, I guess we sell some parts, but you should really go buy our factory gun.
Yeah.
One that sticks out is like Aero Precision.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very centered around builders.
Yeah.
I know I mentioned like the Palmetto, they have kind of hybridizing
kits,
either way. Mm-hmm. You can go and get a full gun, and I'm missing boatloads of options here, so I apologize. But they'll sell like full-on kits, and it's really nice. One of those sites that I was just on recently would sell you everything disassembled.
Oh,
so
nice.
they're actually almost, in a lot of ways, I feel like if they assembled it all into a full gun, it really wouldn't be that much more expensive. Right. Slightly, and that all you're doing is paying for labor there. But they're actually, in that case, what they're doing is encouraging someone to build it themselves.
Yeah.
And they're saying, like, we know that you want to be the one to finish this. Because either you think that's fun, you think you can do it better than we can, you want to sub out at least one part, but we'll still give you a really good deal if, you just throw our regular mil-spec one in there or whatever. So you buy that for whatever reason, but it's really nice because then you don't have to do as much of the parts cataloging.
Right.
You just get to do the building. And so you can be like, I'm going to buy this, which has everything in it that can ship to my door. It has everything that can ship to my door. So the only thing I have to get other than that is the lower, which has the serial number on it, which has to go through an FFL. I'll get all the other stuff, ship right to my door. If I don't feel like subbing parts out, I just open the box and it's all there. And I just
boom,
put it together. Which is really, that's pretty cool. That shows that people are enthusiast oriented, or they have that mindset.
Yeah, and that's kind of like a do-it-yourself DIY. I think that's kind of becoming more common. Period, just in general, in people's lives. I'm going to redo my bathroom, or I'm going to redo my kitchen. I'm going to do it myself, right? And I think that's really cool.
In regard to those kind of more, I guess, kits that you're talking about too, Jim, I see that as being cool. Like earlier, you're like, you guys, inevitably you end up with an extra thing, or you forgot something, and you're like, oh, great, now I had this thing close to put together, but now I need this one piece that I didn't have. That's a good fail-safe for being like, I got all the stuff I'm going to need.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know that you're going to have everything you need.
And it's kind of like that factory gun vibe of, and it's also supposed to work together.
Exactly. That is correct. Yeah, there's all these different styles of, I guess, enthusiasts. It's funny because you have, and I see it's absolutely perfectly mirrored over into the other hobbies that I have, like I mentioned, cars and things like that. But you have the folks who are like, I literally don't care how it's made, what goes into it. I care that it works and I want to use it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's awesome. That's your factory gun person or whatever, And then there's the people who are like, I'm crafty. I like working with my hands. I want to build it myself. But that is a whole lot of BS to try and go through to actually figure out what all I need. Just somebody do that part for me and I'm going to build it. And then there's the people who are like, no, I want to do everything. And in that case, then go out and buy every individual part and you'll probably have something in the end that's pretty unique. And you'll learn a lot too. There's a lot of trial and error. You might screw it up.
Oh, you're definitely going to screw it up.
Yeah, you're probably going to screw it up, let's be honest. And you might have to buy another part because you broke one, or you might put the whole thing together, and it sucks. And then you have to take it all apart and find out where you didn't torque something right, so this doesn't match up with that. Those two parts don't like each other, and nobody else has done it before, and so you tried to look on the forums, but you just took kind of a leap of faith there, and it didn't work. Right. I mean, you'll have probably a little bit more doinking around. But
yeah, as standard as these are supposed to be, very rarely is anything actually standardized, unless it's a factory gun. So,
yep, that's the truth.
But I think, also with that, if you're the type of person that wants to put one of these together, like you have that personality, you like to tinker, you like to learn, you like to put together, maybe even have it, you don't want it not to work, but you're okay with it not working because then you're going to figure out why it wasn't working, and then you're going to have just a better understanding of everything at the end of the day, and you'll know a heck of a lot more than just buying it off the rack. So
yeah. Mark, I feel like you're that guy at that first mention. Don't tell me how it's made. Don't make me do it myself. Just give it to me and let me use it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That is me. But I have, like I said, I've got these amazing resources here at Vortex, so I can be like, there you go.
When you say resources, you act like you say it like it's plural. We all know it's just Ryan.
No, Mucky.
That's
Adam.
what I meant. You just literally, I said we all know it's Ryan, and the first person you mentioned is Ryan. Mucky.
Well, but Ryan and Adam Maxwell and a couple other folks.
That's fair. Yeah.
Kind of. Oh, Dan Knuth helped me out a lot, actually.
Very knowledgeable gentleman.
Very knowledgeable.
Liam is very knowledgeable and a gentleman.
Yeah. We got lots of AR experts around here. And so, which is why, that's why it wasn't intimidating for me, because I'm like, yeah, whatever, somebody's going to know how to do it.
That's the other thing, too, though. Like, there are so many resources out there now.
There are.
Again, kind of in that golden age of being able to build or buy and do whatever, and there's so many resources out there to help you with all of that. So
yeah, and if you're crafty enough with your Google Foo, you can probably find somebody, even if you're into like some weird like very custom idea, you can probably find somebody who's even done it. I mean, somebody's probably like, what about an AR-15 BMG? That's been done.
Yep,
for sure. What about
I want that.
Insert odd idea here. Somebody else has probably had it too.
Yep. They are truly the most versatile platforms out there, for sure.
Liam, what's the deal with Mark's not AR?
So Mark has a BRN 180, which
it's actually kind of neat. I'm talking.
Yeah, why would you not like that?
It's pretty cool.
I just like giving you crap, Mark. It's actually pretty cool.
I actually really want one of those. It is a.
Why don't more people have these? Because I feel like actually when you really break it down, why isn't this the norm?
Well, because it's actually an older design.
Right.
The AR-180 design.
Gosh, what is that, like 60?
Yeah.
I was looking at that the other day.
And I think it's really cool. Brownells has done a great job of bringing retro stuff back. But
super into the clone game.
I really like it. I think it's cool. It's got an AR-180 style function to it. So the recoil springs and the recoil buffer and everything that is inside with the bolt carrier group. So the way Mark has it set up is cool, but it's not the way it needs to be sometimes. Like, that gun doesn't need a buffer tube.
Right. It is very neat.
I'll get with you. We'll figure out how to make it how it should be.
What do you mean how it should be?
Well, Liam was just
with
saying
a different
that
stock,
it's not.
you can put some kind of. You can put anything you want on here, Mark.
Yeah, you could just get a.
Literally, the options are endless. You could put some crazy looking AK wire stock on it. You could put some kind of newfangled folder on it.
Absolutely.
The sky's the limit. Us other guys, we got a big giant spring and a weight in there. We gotta
deal with that.
I'm on the Brownells website right now, Jim.
Shout out to Brownells in this episode.
It is pretty, way to go, Mark. I'm very proud of the fact that, after everybody was getting on you for so long about not having an AR, you just went all in and built 3, and one of them was this, which is very sort of off character for you. Off brand.
It just seemed.
Is it
cool.
off brand though?
For Mark?
Mark likes some weird stuff. I mean, Mark likes weird lunches, so
True.
He likes the weird kind of stuff here. So.
I just like that. Again, it's functional. It's practical. It's handy. That's like nice, handy gun, truck gun, go gun, whatever gun.
Whatever gun. Yeah.
It's too clean.
What do you mean it's too clean?
I mean it's too clean. Is it even?
We can dirty it up a little bit.
Yeah.
We should do that later today. I'll see you down at Edge.
Well, fine. All right. See you there.
Yeah.
Call me.
I feel like, well, fine. Then do show up at Edge and shoot your gun. See if I care.
Yeah.
Twist my arm that hard to do that.
Ain't that the truth? Liam, are we missing anything else?
I don't think so. I think we really covered a lot of it.
And like we said, this wasn't designed to be a how-to build your first AR. Because the thing is, that's another one of those things. If you actually listen to how to build an AR on a podcast, we're just going to be wasting your time.
Good luck.
You're going to be off trying to close your eyes and picture what we're talking about. Or
that's a YouTube project. I know we film these for YouTube, but
Liam already mentioned that. Well, this is a conversation. Liam already mentioned this. There's so many resources out there.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to put together an AR. If that's you're left at that point at the end of this podcast wanting to know that. Absolutely tons of resources for you. Just search.
Yeah.
And you'll find it. We are a country who loves its AR-15. Well, not as a whole sometimes. But let's be honest.
Lots of people?
Let's be honest.
Lots of people.
Pretty much everybody. Even the people that say they don't like the AR-15, they watch those movies and they look at the guy carrying that AR-15.
That could be
and
me.
they're like, that's pretty sick.
They secretly like
They
it.
secretly wish they had one.
That could be me.
Yeah.
I could be cool like that.
I could be. And then they just go and they aren't cool. And they're just not. And that's the thing that kind of stinks. But you know what?
Got to stick to the brand sometimes, right? The brand that you make for yourself.
Not if you're Mark. You just...
Sky's the limit. There's no rules. Unpredictable.
Yeah.
I also like at the end of this too. It's not like there's some clear winner of build versus buy. I don't think there's one.
No.
One isn't better than the other. It's what's right for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's like the gun itself, right? What are you going to use it for, and then what's right for you, and that's exactly the same as if you're going to buy something or build something.
Yep.
Hey Liam, before we go. Can we talk about all these stickers on your water bottle? There's some pretty good ones on here.
Sure, if you want.
I just right off the bat I noticed. So we have a send it that sticker that appears to be in the Seinfeld font.
Yep. We've got a Whataburger.
That one really drew my interest in because we've got some fans of the podcast who I think are also very big fans of Whataburger. And I'm curious, is this pro Whataburger or are you actually throwing shade?
No, it's very pro Whataburger. This is from my buddy A Gans on Instagram. If you have any questions about radios or communication devices, he's your dude.
I actually do. I have lots of questions about that.
Hit him up. So
are you getting some comm stuff,
maybe
Jim?
we should. I don't know.
He's a big comm guy.
I think so. We should get him on the podcast.
These are fun. I mean, this is a very fun one, because we are in Wisconsin. So.
That's hilarious. It's a
Milwaukee Tools MP5 machine gun.
Please tell me Milwaukee makes that.
I wish.
And then it runs on, well, it wouldn't need to, but somehow it runs on M18 batteries.
Right? Yep. and you got some other cool stuff.
There's a
here.
kitty cat saying good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, holding the bomb.
What's forbidden trample?
Forbidden trample. So it's kind of a playoff of the don't tread on me, but I'm Korean, so it's got like a little bit of a forbidden tiger. It's also Year of the Tiger for people.
Mark, you would love this one. Do you get it? Get it?
The Subsonics.
Get it?
Oh my God! Hold that up for the cameras.
Look at that.
Hit up MP5 guys.
Oh my
if you want these,
it is not the
guys.
Seattle Supersonics. Instead, it is the Subsonics, and it has also an MP5
SD.
Maybe that can be their new basketball team someday if they ever get one back.
Oh my gosh, that would go so well in Seattle.
So well.
So,
Mark, I have extras. I will bring you
those Subsonics.
I will gladly stick
those Subsonics
that to,
are so hot right now. Wow.
Still tragic that the Supersonics left. But
honestly,
dare to dream.
It's the coolest team in the NBA for no other reason than just the fact that they were the Supersonics. Colors were great.
I think they're coming back.
Do you think so?
Yeah. I listened to a different podcast and big NBA podcast. And they said expansion's probably coming. So Vegas
that would be so cool.
Vegas and Seattle are probably back in.
Oh, I'm getting chills.
It would be fantastic. If they went with anything other than Supersonics, it would be so dumb.
Oh,
I already I don't really watch the NBA. It was cool that Milwaukee won last year, but I definitely wouldn't watch ever if it was anything other than the Supersonics.
For sure.
People would lose their minds getting the Supersonics back, and they would equally lose their minds if they brought a team back there and it wasn't the Supersonics. Like
but
in a
one
bad
would
way.
Be in a good
one
way,
is good way,
one would be in a bad
yes.
way. Mm-hmm. What do you think the level of lose their minds would be if it was the Subsonics?
Higher or lower if they didn't pick Supersonics?
A lot of people wouldn't get it.
A lot of people wouldn't know what that was.
They'd be like, I don't get it, it's worse. And then all of us gun guys would be like, but it's better.
It's so much better.
Because it suppresses.
Everyone who was listening is now not listening anymore.
Yeah, that's all right. We lost them all already anyway. So
yeah, we'll probably be able to look at some sort of graph where just people
falls
off a cliff.
Yeah, a lot of people unsubscribed. Sorry about that.
Well, if you didn't unsubscribe yet.
It sounds like we're your kind of people. Okay. Well, you don't have to tell us what guns you have by any means.
No.
But if you've
probably got lost in the boating accident too.
Honestly, seriously, at some point we're going to have Gun Island out in that body of water. They'll have built up so much it'll be an island of guns. I want to walk on that island.
I do too.
But are you a buy or a build kind of guy or gal? Let us know.
And if we didn't answer one of your questions on either of those things, let us know. We'll try and answer it.
Please. All right.
Thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.